A hillside, a view that never changes. Afternoon turns to twilight, and a quiet woman sits on a bench, legs crossed at the calf. A ripple through the grass, scattered cow pats, but never any cows. The same time every day. Waiting, always waiting, and sometimes she's lucky. Not today, though. "I've seen you here before." Sitting beside her, a young man has spoken. He's barely a man at all. He takes out a small metal box, flips the lid with a flick of the thumb, and its gleam blinds her. The vices of a man and the wisdom of a child. She's seen him before, too. He begins to grind his drugs, and there's so much care and skill in his dexterous fingers, his measured breathing. He could be a carpenter, making the finest furniture, or a musician. She imagines him as Paganini, sways to the music in her head. "Have you got a light?" His words are distorted by the joint between his teeth. "How old are you? Have you got a light or not?" She has got a light. She passes it over, and he takes it. He takes a hard, long suck, and the air between them billows. A luxurious sigh escapes him, but it's luxury he hasn't earned. "You're welcome," she says. "What?" "Yeah." Her eyes are back on the nearest hill. Clusters of trees and bushes grow here and there, and each time they shiver she fancies she sees him. But he's as remote as the wind to her now, and getting further away. "What do you come here for?" the young man asks. There's a movement in a bush on a hill she's watching, the unmistakable tremble of something alive, and she perches, leaning forward, on the edge of the cold bench. I know what you said. Shut up, will you?" "Bloody hell," he says, but doesn't add any more. The bush shudders again, and she holds her breath. Something is breaking free. Her fingers are white with pressure on the damp wood. If she was religious she'd pray, but it's too late for that. The thing darts forward from the foliage, and she knows it's too small and too fast. A rabbit, another bloody rabbit. She wants to cry, and she feels the emotion of crying acutely, but somehow the tears won't come. She steals a glance at her companion, and a tear is rolling down his cheek. While she sits in a cloud of his smoke, he sits in the fog of her despair, and he understands something. "You're waiting for someone, aren't you?" he says. "I am." "I can feel it." The sun moves out of the sky, and a stillness descends. Two souls on a bench look straight ahead. His spliff was thrust into a moist cowpat long ago, barely smoked. There's a valley between their hill and the next, and a fox scurries across, cowering in the moving shadows, afraid of all that lives, but it doesn't interest them. They watch the peak. "He's here. I can feel it," the woman says. "So can I." And there he is. An unremarkable sort of a man, he thinks, getting along in years, a dog at his heels. The young man sees him first and points with such enthusiasm that immediately after he regrets losing his cool. But for that one moment he feels her joy, and oh, it's better than anything he's ever experienced. So good and pure, so very real. Without pretense, it's flying and it's falling, it's singing. The smell of home and the taste of memory. In the afterglow of it, he sees himself quite clearly, and finds he is repulsed. "He looks old enough to be your dad, but he's your fella, isn't he?" "My husband, yes." "I'm sorry. I've never known anyone who's died. Well, my gran, but that was when I was a kid." "It's all right." "How long's it been since, "Oh, a very long time." "And you still come here every night, in the hope?" "Yes, every night, always." The air is so thick that he fights the urge to swat at its density. Reminded of his tin, he fumbles in his pocket, hooks his fingers around it, and brings it in front of his eyes. Then in one fluid movement, he stands and throws with all his power, and it's more than he knew he possessed. There's a flash high up above the valley, as the moon reveals its journey, and it's gone. He sits heavily down, smiling. "We bought the dog just before it happened," says the woman. Her companion squints. "Pointer?" "Pointer. I've always liked them." The young man looks sideways at the woman. "But then, how did the dog die? Was it an accident that killed them both?" but she shakes her head impatiently, clamps a cool hand over his mouth. He follows her quivering index finger, and at first he can only see the dog. The darkness seems too sudden, and he's unprepared. He closes his eyes, forcing himself to do so for 5 seconds. When he opens them again, things are just as dark, but there are cleaner edges to the trees. There are different shades of black and grey and silver making up the landscape, and he can see the old man. He's on his knees, and the dog is running around him with terrified, erratic leaps, random changes of direction. Then there's a single shout, not help, but a name. Marie, across the hills. Marie, once, and it's over. Suddenly it's clear to the young man, and although the reality should frighten him, he can feel nothing but the waves of joy coming off her as if by convection. Of course, when he looks, she isn't there. Only a small dry patch on the bench, and the ghost of an impression in the dirt where her feet were a moment before. He can feel the cold now. He wants to leave this place and be warm again. He stands up, winces at the ache in his legs, turns to the bench and sees there some letters. Squinting, struggling with his eyes, he can't read the words which trickle along the brass plate. He pats his pockets where his tin should be, and finds her lighter, strikes it. Tears will fall as you recall the moon in all its splendour. The words, will you surrender to me, Marie? He runs now. He's not afraid, but he's sure he needs to be gone from this place now. He's seen death for the first time, and he wants to be beside the living again. Clods of earth are flying away from his feet as he rushes to the lights of the town. A warm, yellow glow spread over the familiar land like melted butter. He has to slow to navigate a stile, and it's while he's clambering over, slipping on the slick wood, that something claws at the tender skin on the back of his knee. He cries out, and his own voice reminds him of a stranger's dying sound, the woman's name. But near to him there's another noise, a choked, sad half-howl. He finds he isn't afraid any more when he hears that. It's so pathetic. He wants to help, and he turns to see Baxter, he reads from the tag. He gathers the pointer up in his arms, and the dog trembles in his clumsy grip. The man lowers Baxter to the ground on the bright side of the stile, and removing his belt, leashes the dog. Together they take one more look across the hills, and there, on a bench inscribed with the words of an old love song, sit a young couple. The landscape changes relentlessly around them, blurring with busy movement, withering and dying, sometimes bursting into new life. But they are constant, seeing only each other, their hands tightly clasped. "Good to meet you, Baxter. My name's Jack," says the man, and they walk together towards the light, towards something new.
Supernatural Tales.